Have you ever noticed that whether it's anxiety or depression or even obsessive thoughts, all of these struggles seem strangely familiar at their core? Modern research shows us that beneath all of the different diagnostic labels, there might actually be one common thread tying most mental disorders together. And it turns out this thing keeps showing up again and again, no matter the diagnosis. What I want to do in today's video is to explore what that hidden factor is and to look at why it's so important. A lot of the people I work with come with anxiety disorders, including OCD, social anxiety, health anxiety, simple phobias, or depression, or a mood disorder, right? And in early sessions, what they often ask me for is to give them coping mechanisms to deal with their suffering, to deal with their experience, to deal with what they're going through that they don't know how to manage. And this idea of coping mechanisms is very common in modern psychology. And what people are actually asking for is something to help them to alleviate the distress that they're experiencing. So when people first come for therapy, their natural instinct and their natural desire is to learn how to make the distress go away. How can I decrease my anxiety? How can I decrease my low mood, my chronic low mood? So the natural human instinct is to want to make the distress stop, to reduce the distress. And a lot of modern psychology basically colludes with this. It offers us these quick fixes, such as compassion-focused therapy or self-soothing techniques, mindfulness, meditation in order to calm oneself. And these things are helpful, but they're only short-term fixes. It's something like putting a plaster on a deeper wound. It just soothes things temporarily. And another part of the problem that I'm seeking to address in today's video is what the messages that we get from modern psychology. So, for example, the word anxiety is often used as if anxiety in itself is a mental disorder, which it isn't. Like I've heard adverts on the radio that say, "Do you experience symptoms of anxiety?" And the fact that we say symptoms of anxiety treats anxiety as if it is a disorder, whereas anxiety is just a manifestation of the passion of fear, which we feel physically in our bodies because fear is seated in our bodies. Now, there are such things as anxiety disorders, but an anxiety disorder is what happens when we don't relate healthily to the passion of anxiety. That's what an anxiety disorder is. And it leads to inordinate levels of anxiety which are disproportionate to the environment. That's one way of describing what an anxiety disorder is. But the anxiety in itself isn't a disorder. It's just that we're relating to it unhealthily. Now, as I say, when people come for therapy, they want their anxiety to decrease. But this brings me on to this hidden factor that's present in any mental health difficulty, I'd say any mental health difficulty. The area of research is called transdiagnostic research, so it looks at underlying factors that are present in basically all mental disorders. And one of the major things that has been discovered is that irrespective of what type of mental disorder we're experiencing, whether it's an anxiety disorder, even PTSD, depression, the mood disorders, one of the key features is a low tolerance of distress. So a perceived or actual inability to tolerate levels of distress. And when I say distress, I mean distressing emotion, essentially. So anxiety, fear, despair, sorrow, anger, a low tolerance threshold for these difficulties. Now, the problem with coping mechanisms for these things, and I want to preface this with coping mechanisms in themselves aren't bad, right? So we need to use coping mechanisms as a tool, but it's as a stepping stone to do something else. Coping mechanisms in themselves don't cure anything. They just teach us to reduce the emotional manifestation, the passionate distress that we experience. But coming back to this idea of a low tolerance of distress, What's more helpful in the long term to overcome anxiety disorders and to leave them behind us, or to overcome depression and leave it behind me, to overcome OCD and leave it behind me, is to increase my distress tolerance so that I can tolerate more fear, so that I can tolerate more sorrow, so that I can tolerate more distress. This links not only to healthy psychology, but it also links to the spiritual life. It also links to um, deepening our relationship with God and deepening our prayer life and advancing in our relationship with God. But how you would put this in moral terms is developing the virtue of fortitude. Now, fortitude is a natural virtue, so it's something that I can work on of my own free will. I can make choices to um, increase the virtue, the natural virtue of fortitude in me. And in doing that, I'm actually paving the way to receive the grace of supernatural fortitude, So it even touches the life of grace. So building fortitude, which links to an increase in distress tolerance, is good for me psychologically, and it's good for me spiritually. And again, it's pretty counterintuitive. And it runs contrary to a lot of what most modern therapists say, actually, because for my money, there's an excessive focus on self-soothing in modern therapy. Okay, there's not enough of a focus on strengthening of the psyche. So what does this look like? What does this look like? I've put an image of Saint Therese of Lisieux in the thumbnail of today's video, and I want to link it to the teaching of some of the saints. I always like to do that. Saint Therese of Lisieux is known for her little way, okay, the little way of Saint Therese. She was a Carmelite mystic. She died at a very young age. She experienced a shed load of suffering at the end of her life, but she had habituated herself throughout her life to choose discomfort, to choose discomfort. And this is a key feature of her little way. I'm going to choose something that I know will be uncomfortable. I'm going to choose something that I know will be uncomfortable. I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. And examples that she gave were things like when she's sitting at the dinner table, she's going to sit with her back not resting on the chair so that nobody else can see, but that she knows she's choosing this discomfort to bring her closer to God. She would choose not to put salt on her food so it wouldn't be so flavorsome for her. So she'd forego a comfort. A key idea in relation to this is that if we have an anxiety disorder or a mood disorder or depression, broadly speaking, comfort hurts us. You don't want to aim for comfort. If you have an anxiety disorder or depression, you want to aim for discomfort. You want to aim to push yourself out of your comfort zone. There was a song years ago when I was younger by Baz Luhrmann, who's a director, who directed Moulin Rouge and Romeo and Juliet, some great films in the 90s. But he released a song called Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen. And the song essentially was like some background music and overlaid with a headmaster giving advice to some students who are about to leave school, to graduate from high school, essentially, in America. And it's just a series of pieces of advice. It's a lovely song. It's very well worth a listen to. But one of the pieces of advice that the headmaster gives during his speech to his students at the end of their school year is do something every day that frightens you. Do something every day that frightens you. That's beautiful advice. That's wonderful advice. That's the kind of advice that leads to a strengthening of your persona, that leads to a strengthening of your psyche, that leads to psychological strength. Psychological health, a part of that is psychological strength. Just like in physical health, a part of physical health is physical strength. If you want to be healthier, build muscle. That's a good idea, because you'll be healthier in so doing, and you'll live longer. It's just good for you. And what pertains to the body pertains to the soul. So doing something that frightens you every day, and it can be a small thing, right? It doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to do a skydive. It might be looking up and making eye contact with people. It might be speaking up when you feel like keeping silent. It might be taking a cold shower. It might be going for a walk when you feel like staying in bed. Okay? So doing something that evokes some level of distress. And over time, increasing, working to increase, working to increase. Progressive overload, you'd say, in a physical sense. Okay? So an increase in distress tolerance is the hidden factor that ties together most mental disorders, all common mental health problems. Okay, I'm not talking so much about the psychotic disorders, but even though it's a feature, again, there's an argument to be made there. But common mental health problems, so the anxiety disorders, mood disorders, depression, and intolerance of distress is an underlying cause. What's the resolution? What's the solution? Increase distress tolerance by choosing to do something every day that pushes you out of your comfort zone. Do something every day that frightens you. And that's what I'd give as a call to action from today's video. Choose something on a daily basis that you can do that you know will make you uncomfortable. It needs to be a free choice, right? When we're doing this therapeutically, it should be a set apart activity that you're just doing for therapy, that you're just doing to work on your OCD or just doing to work on your social anxiety. So not something necessarily in your normal day-to-day run of life, although that can be effective too. But if you choose a set apart task, find a hill in your local area and run to the top as fast as you can and say, well, in the next month, I want to reduce that time by 2 seconds. Choose something that pushes you, that increases levels of stress. And in so doing, you'll become psychologically stronger and you'll be less likely to experience any anxiety disorder or depression. Okay, if you found this useful, please like, subscribe, and share this video. If you've got any questions, pop them in the comments below, and I'd love to I'll try to respond to all of the comments that I get. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. God bless. Bye-bye.